Hey everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Hope you're all safe, sound, and healthy. And today we're going to talk about some naked thoughts concerning lots of little things. Mainly, this is something that I've been stressing about for quite some time. Um, I think we as a society, one of the biggest psychological problems that we have created for the new generation is sexualizing everything. And I think this is a problem that was created in our generation too. And but instead of decreasing, it's only increasing. We have sexualized every single thing in life. We have sexualized every movement, every gesture, every relationship, um, and every thought. And I think that that is actually the wrong way to go about it. See, the if you go way back to romance and uh, the theme of sex, the running theme of sex, and all. First of all, you need to understand how things always start, why they start, and the reason why. I guess you can understand they are never allowed to start in the first place because they do eventually end in the same way that people fear they do. So if you start something, then I think in a way you take responsibility for the way it ends. For example, the whole idea of PDA was shunned upon, and even if we had those programs, we had them post watershed, right? So that was like for the adults and all. Even now, as you know, we always have these PG variations on different TV shows that we put up. But as a screenwriter, as a producer, and as a novelist myself, I would tell you that I do understand the reason why, in the first place, the PDA was not liked, and why it was brought into the screen, and then why now again it might have to people might have to decide to sort of decrease its appearances on screen. In the beginning, as we know, PDA was shunned because public display of affection was not something that was considered decent. And I'll tell you again why. Because psychologically, even today, no matter how much we talk about the freedom of PDA, the truth is we all are very acutely aware of what a personal, intimate act it is when you choose to display affection for another person, right? And it's called intimate for a reason. It's called an intimate act for a reason because it is intimate. So it's not something that you would always like to display in front of public, because it is something that is deeply personal. It is something that locks your relationship with the other person, and something that is personal is considered private for a good reason, because when as long as it is personal, as long as it is private, its value remains. And whether you like to agree with it or not, this is a fact. Okay, this is a fact that we cannot object to, or we cannot defy, or we cannot debate on. Although I know many have liked to do that, and I myself too, sometimes I would like to debate within myself as to the exceptions to the rule. But remember, they're called exceptions to the rule for a reason. They're exceptions. So again, the reason why PDA was then brought onto the screen was to normalize it, so that people should understand that this is something that is expected between people who have intimate relationship with each other, and that there is no harm in them displaying that affection for each other. Again, so you see, it is fine that they were trying to normalize it because they felt that it was made too much of a big deal. But you see, that's the problem again, that while trying to normalize it, we again made it into that much of a big deal at this point. Why? Because at first, it did become normal. Yes, it became normal to such an extent that we have desensitized the people regarding intimate acts. And so these intimate acts are now more of imitative acts. They become cliched acts. But then here again lies another problem. Because, see, not all of us have the same background, and so not all of us have this, come from the same culture, and at the same time not all of us watch the same shows, the same dramas, the same films. So what to one for example audience would be an understood cliche, to somebody else might not at all be something that he's aware of. I'll give you a very small example. For example, the little intimate acts that were heightened or highlighted when public display of affection was freshly brought onto the screen were acts of intimacy. For example, holding each other's hands, kissing somebody on the forehead, um, the linking of fingers, um, you know, lightly tapping somebody on the shoulder, ruffling somebody's hair. So, as we say, apparently innocent acts that are actually intimate. So that's how they were basically, shown, that innocent acts, because because that is originally how they even started slowly displaying intimacy on screen, to go through censorship, and also because they imitated real life, because in those days, as I said, even in real life public display of affection was shunned upon, and so people, they would be very tentative, very cautious, very careful in the way they handled each other, in public especially, and even when not in public, you can say. So it was always these little innocent acts that you would platonically do with your platonic relationships as well. And again, as I said, and I'll come to that, this is also where the problem also begins now. So, for example, holding the hand of somebody and putting it in your pocket. Now, this is supposed to be an intimate act, but again, I'll tell you, to many people in real life now, many of these cliched acts are what they really are, outdated or cliched, or they are desensitized over these, or some of them are just not even aware of the fact that these acts are considered also sexual and not just platonic. So, for example, if there is somebody who's not really aware of how these acts have been portrayed in certain cultures, or in certain screens, or in certain plays and dramas and movies and scripts, to them, if you're holding hands, they're like, okay, yeah, so I mean, you hold your father's hand, you hold your mother's hand, you hold your sister's hand, you hold your friend's hands. In some cultures, holding hands are very, very platonic. So if somebody tries to imitate an intimate gesture and try to hold somebody's another person's hand, and think that this person will get the message that I'm trying to send, yeah, well, 50-50 here. 50% of the time, the person probably doesn't even know what you're trying to tell that person. To that person, it might just be something that's part of the norm. So, like, again, if you've become at a certain comfortable level in a relationship with somebody, and you know so in that case, holding hands, tapping each other, ruffling each other's hair, tweaking somebody's cheek or chin or nose, or just holding somebody or putting their hands in your pocket or something, none of these things would be considered sexual. And I'm being very honest here, and I know there are many people here who would agree with me, even though, again, you see, there's that audience that has been um, fed these intimate acts as intimate as sexual. So to them, it's like, how can you call it platonic? I mean, it's obvious, but you see, it's not obvious to everybody. So that is one of the problems that come with mixed signals. When we call them mixed signals, this is also in a way part of that. That is part of that mixed signals thing that's going on. On the other hand, things that are very, very obviously sexual are obviously the actual intimate acts, such as closing that crossing that personal space, um, in an obvious way, trying to get physical with somebody in an obvious way, like you know the way you hug somebody, for example, can tell a lot. The way, but again, in now, for example, in our culture, hugging is part of our culture, but obviously never with the opposite sex. But again, with the opposite sex too, hugging can be a very platonic and normal uh, part of our culture when you're doing it amongst relatives. So you see, this is where it all comes in. For example, you will have cousins, you will have uncles and aunts, and you're all hugging each other in a culture that's big on hugging and big on platonic public display of affection. So in certain cultures, it's kissing, air kisses, which we say, like on the left cheek, on the right cheek, as we know in certain parts of Europe it is considered normal. So, but there is one thing that in every single culture you would know, and that's obvious, that is a sexual act, and that is when you're kissing somebody on the lips, for example, or when you're hugging somebody in what is obviously a wrong way, which the other person would feel uncomfortable, or when you are encroaching upon somebody's personal space, which normally you would not do in the kind of relationship that you have with that person. So again, as I said, it varies from person to person, and it varies from uh, background to background, and it varies from culture to culture. But this is why we cannot always take it for granted that the acts, the little acts of intimacy that we are trying to convey to the other person, could be received as exactly those kind of intimate sexual acts. So that's number one. Now, number two, as I said, we have sexualized even platonic um, gestures and acts. Uh, which is why actually it has created an even bigger problem, because now you get even more confused because you don't know if that person is being platonic with you or if that person is being sexual. So that is another drawback that came from constantly um, you know mandating sexual intimacy or sexual relationships, or basically sexualizing everything on screen. Okay, so we've gone from the innocent acts becoming sexual to the sexual acts becoming more blatant, and so you begin with the what the frack moments, and then at the end you get so used to those moments that they're not what the frack moments anymore until a new what the frack moment begins. So that is how we keep on changing the meaning of physical gestures. Okay, just like how language develops and evolves with time, and words sort of tend to transcend their original meanings, similarly our physical acts also tend to transcend their original meanings. And that is where the problem arises again, as I said, because not everybody would catch on to that new trending meaning. um, Now, when we sexualize every single relationship, the dangers that come in is basically removing that option, we can say, or the diversity or variety in relationships in life, which is very dangerous. It's absolutely dangerous, psychologically speaking, as well. I think most of us are practically unhinged because of this very seemingly trivial anomaly in our lives. The fact that you now do not know that there is a barrier in certain relationships. It's like um, it's all bets are off. It's kind of that kind of a situation now where it's all bets are off. So every single relationship has been sexualized, and every single person in in this generation, and especially the next, um, they've sort of been brainwashed into this configuration, which is why they are unable to have healthy, normal relationships. And then we lament on their antisocial phenomena. But you see, that is where actually one of the root causes of antisocial behavior that is stemmed from our generation, as well as the generation, especially the generation after us. We are a little more normal than them because as we were growing up, sexualization of relationships were not yet the norm. But you could say in my generation, which is Generation Y, uh, you can say by the time we hit 20s, even, it was not fully sexualized. And I think this is those of us who are right now, who have just entered our 40s, right? The 1980s people. who were born in the 1980s. Those who were born in the 1990s, you could say when they hit 20s, that's when everything had become sexualized. So for us, it was when we hit 30s, you could say. So there's that. Now, now everything is so overblown that I remember, because even when I was doing my project, my final project of my masters, and it was essentially a spy uh, script. It was a spy story, and it was a script about a person who is working undercover, and about how nobody even knows that she's a spy. And so I actually keep her espionage life at the background, and in the foreground is her life as an ordinary person, and slowly, slowly revealing her background as a spy. So my teacher actually helped me with two things. He wanted me to bring more of that espionage thing out in the foreground, which I was a bit scared to do, because I did not want it to be full blown thriller, but at the same time I did want to. At that time I was not very confident about writing very good mystery oriented thrillers. I thought I would just mess it up, but that was and he was an extremely good help there when he kept pushing me towards that. Although he kind of enjoyed the black humor that I had put into the regular daily life thing, and the slow reveal, you can say, of her background. But he wanted more of that background, because I guess he was right that that would hold more interest, more, it would attract more. So yeah. But the other thing that he kept telling me to do was to add some, even minor, even if minor, but some sexual content, like maybe an intimate content, like kissing, or a little, or like snogging, or like a little bit more on that level. But I steadfastly refused. Why? Because it had nothing to do with the theme of my story, nothing at all. And just to put it in there, why? Because it is now an essential part of every script or every content that we produce. um, you know it's like, it's like Bollywood. In Bollywood, a film is not a film if there aren't any songs. So there has to be, at least two songs, and a third could be thrown in as an item song. So it was always like, it's like, without a song, your Bollywood film is not a film. It's not a complete film. So the that's the problem with the Western scripts now, is that a Western script, even if it's thriller or suspense or mystery or murder or cozy mysteries or whatever, but there has to be some sexual content in it. It has to be just thrown there, whether it actually has anything to do with it or not. And to me, that was essentially, uh, just to me. I mean, I'm not offending anybody, and I understand. Again, I would say I understand why it's become an important component of every single content. But to me, this was essentially bad writing, to just force in some sexual content. Why? You know, just to have a hot scene, or to entice the audiences, what little audience may not have been interested in it. So, but as we know, those who are true to the genre, those fans who are true to a certain genre, they do not like these kind of things. Those of us who love thrillers, we don't see why there has to be a sex scene or a nudity scene or a sexual related content in this murder mayhem mystery that we're watching. So there is, and in a noir, for example, even in a noir, they've sexualized noir so much as well. And you're thinking that, okay, why does every noir film all of a sudden now have to have some sexual content? It doesn't have to have a sexual content. But so that is how essential it has become now, as part of your everyday uh, you know content creation. And that too has added to these psychological problems. Again, believe it or not, or agree with it or not, but it's a fact. If you can be objective enough to look deep into it, it is a fact. Because again, we have numbed the new generation. uh, we have numbed them and desensitized them to, number one, sexuality, sex, acts of intimacy, and number two, we have numbed them to platonic relationships. So, the innocent and pure relationships that we have in our lives, they are what keep us sane. They are what keep our minds healthy. We talk about mental health all the time. One of the root causes of mental instability is not just sexualizing, but over sexualizing every single thing in life, every act, every word, every relationship. And that is just wrong. You need to back off a bit on that, okay? We need to just take a breath, take two steps back, turn around, and go back to being platonic just for a while, to appreciate the value of platonic relationships, to appreciate the value of variety and diversity in relationships, which is a sign of healthy relationships. Because if you cannot differentiate between your relationships, then you have lost uh, all sense of normalcy. I mean, on one hand, you say that people should be able to know what relationship has what effect in your life and what relationship has what place in your life. And then on the other hand, you have just completely annihilated it all by sexualizing every single relationship in your life, from parents to children to brothers to sisters, siblings, and then moving on to, friends, and, moving on again to, because I remember that there was a time when we kept arguing that why can't a man and a woman just be friends? you know why do they always have to be sexual in relationship? Why can't it be platonic? I think suddenly we have just flipped it over again, and we're like, now we're arguing that why should it be platonic again? um, there is no black and white here. There are always exceptions to the rule, and this is why, even though men and women will most probably always end up in one way or the other in a non-platonic relationship, but at the same time, that is not necessarily true. How many of us have got male friends who have never even once sexualized their relationship with us, or never even once have we thought about it? uh, yeah, so many of us, there's so many of us, because this is real life. In real life, again, there's diversity in relationships regardless of the gender. Okay, and I think it is because of this that we're constantly talking about LGBTQ and their rights and everything as human beings. And so again, this is something that I always find very ironic. We always start a movement by talking about the right to choose, and then we take away everybody's right to choose. Have you noticed that? I mean, seriously, it's like we were always talking about feminism, but again, the idea of feminism, the idea of women being equal, was something that was a bit alien to the Western society, in the medieval times. And how did they actually manage to fight for it? Was by looking at how the women in the Islamic Empire lived. And they lived as equals, they got their inheritance, they were not properties or assets, they were never given away by their fathers, and they do not take their husbands' names. This is how a truly Islamic society, this is what it's built on, right? And so, on the other hand, the Western society that had to fight for these rights, and very rightly so, it's their divine right, it's God given. In Islam, it's our divine right, it's God given. But again, so when they had to fight for their rights and they worked so hard on it, on feminism, then suddenly this new, now the, again, what was the root cause here? Non sexualization of women. Like, not treating women as sexual objects, because in Islam, again, the whole concept of the dressing of women is so that men should take women more seriously as human beings with brains rather than as sexual objects. So when, and then suddenly this again got flipped when this really weird twisted form of feminism started in the Western society, where women said that even if we, strip ourselves naked, that is our empowerment. Actually, that's not your empowerment. You just empower the men. Although as a woman I do actually understand where that again stems from, because yes, sometimes if I'm in the mood I would also just love to say that, you know what, who cares. But again, psychology, you have to, we are the ones who are arguing about psychology all the time as to how a man and a woman can never be just friends, and this is the modern western culture that keeps on harping on that. So then tell me, how is stripping a woman bare naked empowerment of women? And how is it not sexualizing women in front of men? And how is it not empowering men? You know, you're actually empowering men when you're stripping yourself down to again becoming that same sexual object that the feminist movement fought very hard to eradicate. So, see, that is the irony here. So basically, we're just going around full circle. And then again, as the irony, which we will complete now with this next sentence, that when we now talk about women rights, we talk about women in Islam, that they're always covered, and that is, you know, they have no freedom of choice. Hello, we do have a freedom of choice. It is our choice to cover ourselves and to keep ourselves modest. It is our choice to empower ourselves so that men do not see us as sexual objects and they see us as what we really are, and that is damn well their equals. Okay? So again, now you're talking about freedom to choose. Then who are you to choose what a Muslim woman should wear or should not wear? How is that freedom of choice? If you are advocating for the freedom of choice for the women in Islam, then why are you forcing them to remove their hijabs in your schools in the West? And why are you forcing them to dress less modestly? Why are you forcing them to follow your dress code? So basically, you're saying that you don't have a choice. We just don't like the way you dress, so we want you to dress the way we want you to. That is it. That is the underlying message here, because I don't see that freedom of choice message going around when you're forcing a woman to uh, nudify herself to fit into your concept of what a woman should wear. You see, that's not freedom of choice. So similarly, now we'll come to the LGBTQ. Similarly, learning to tolerate and accept the diversity and variety in the human affairs would mean not insulting, offending, or killing somebody for being different. But at the same time, it does not mean forcing yourself to be part of that if you don't want to, you know? So, again, the concept of universalizing or generalizing everybody, putting them into one category, that is what we're fighting against every single time we talk about freedom of choice. And then you go full circle and go back to stripping people of their freedom of choice. So, for example, you are stripping a person who has a problem with the LGBTQ community of his right to have a problem with it, you know. Yes, I mean, he has no right to pass judgments, and he definitely has no right to say anything bad to them because they're human beings. And first consideration of humanity is consideration for the other human beings' feelings. Okay, we're not inanimate objects, we're all human beings, we have feelings. And that is again where freedom of expression also comes. In the Western society, freedom of expression means that you can insult Islam, you can insult the Prophet, you can insult anything and everything that you do not agree with, and that's freedom of speech. But the minute you talk about how Israel has invaded Palestine illegally and how they have committed genocide and war crimes, then that becomes anti Semitism. This right here is the hypocrisy that we're talking about. This right here is what I'm saying, that you talk about freedom of speech and freedom of choice, but you are actually stripping people of their freedom of both speech and choice. So that's not how it works. Freedom means that you should shut your mouth if it is something you do not like, just like how you would expect somebody else to shut their mouth about something they do not like. It's really just as simple as that. So, if I have no problems with the LGBTQ community, that's my own personal, uh, That's just me. That's my own personal attitude towards it. But I have no right to force somebody who does have a problem to accept them completely. Obviously, it's going to take some time. Similarly, for the LGBTQ community, to be forced to come out even if they don't want to is also a violation of their rights. You can't just force them to come out every day and tell. It's up to them. It's their private matter. See, it all boils down to that. It's your privacy. That's another thing we have stripped the new generation of, the sense of privacy, the sense of being private. Your private life is your private life. It's your private life for a reason. Okay? A sexual act is a private act, and it's a private act again for a reason. It's not a public act of display. It's something that's intimate. Something that's intimate means it is something that is extremely acutely personal, which means it is extremely acutely private. We need to reteach that value and importance of privacy to the new generation, because they're the ones who are going to suffer. We were brought up on the sense of privacy. We were not brought up with the internet and with throwing everything out there. So it's only as we grew older, as teenagers, that's when the internet came up, and then later on social media came up, and then in the beginning, obviously, like everybody else, we moronically tried to spread everything out on the internet, and then we realized its repercussions. But the thing is that the young generation is too exposed, and that is wrong. That is wrong. We cannot have them too exposed to everything. We cannot have them too exposed to hurt. We cannot have them too exposed to madness, to insanity, or to their violation of their personal and private space and of their head space. Most importantly, the violation of somebody's uh, personal head space. That is extremely important. When we violate somebody's personal space, it's not just a physical act. We can also violate somebody's headspace, and we're doing that through the internet, and we're doing that through over sexualizing every single act and gesture and thought and relationship. And we're doing that by, this is brainwashing. Okay, this is basically brainwashing. So we're talking about how we don't want people to be brainwashed anymore, and then we go on to brainwash our version of what it is that we want people to think. So that is wrong. So again, I would say, if a person is, for example, gay, we have no right to offend that person. We have no right to judge that person. We have no right to say anything to hurt that person's feelings. But at the same time, we also have no right to force other people to get in with it. To, for example, I know that there are all these kind of, they think it's maybe funny, or maybe they think that it is, um, to try to lure people who are extremely hetero uh, into uh, into becoming, bisexual, or into becoming homosexual. And again, why? I mean, it means that you are deriving sadistic perverse pleasure from making somebody enter into something that is not uh, he normally would not do, or he does not agree with, and you are brainwashing that person into thinking that this is the only way. So that is wrong. That is completely, basically wrong. You can't do that. Just like how you can't force. See, again, that's where the whole fight began, right? You can't force a gay person to become straight. So why are you trying to force straight people to become gay? That is one of the biggest issues right now, which I think people are sort of turning a blind eye to. But this is getting more and more and more of a common running theme that I'm seeing in so many of these. Again, remember, we as writers, we know how to manipulate people's thought processes. Politicians manipulate people's thought processes. They use writers to do that. They use people who are good at creating narratives, remember, to do that. Um, we create narratives, we bring it to screen, and then when we start pumping the screen with the same narrative over and over again, that is essentially brainwashing. So it's like, because if you need to remember, the media, mainstream and social, they're not just used to pass information or to entertain. They are basically mediums used to plant uh, to plant a certain way of thinking or a concept or a way of life into people, to normalize things that they would not normalize, to introduce new things that they find different and help them to, you know, to become one with it, for example. So it's, for example, when the whole idea of progress begins, and when people are resistant to progress, then we use the media to show the people the positive effects of progress, be it in relationships, be it actual development, be it financial, be it social, all the different changes that occur in life. So we kind of sort of push people towards, um, you know, understanding and accepting and acknowledging that new change that has entered society. So it's very important. We have to deal with it very responsibly. It's very important that we do not overuse or abuse our authority in that way, because then again it would be brainwashing. And so, what's the difference between us and the people that we have been trying to fight with regards to this exact same problem, and that is brainwashing? So we rebel against brainwashing only to brainwash other people into what we think should be the way of life. And that is the irony of it all. So we talk about freedom to choose, and then we're forcing people to choose what we want. So we're forcing girls to now wear mini skirts and tank tops because we think that is trending. We're forcing girls and boys to think that if they're virgins, then that is something that is very embarrassing, and that is something that is very bad, and that they need to get it fixed ASAP. And then we're so you see, this is exactly the same thing. You are not bringing freedom to anybody. You are just forcing people now to go the other way, from the one way that they were at to the other way. So first we had a problem with people who had a problem with those who were sexually active prior to marriage. Now we have a problem with those who are not sexually active prior to marriage. So, you really need to figure it out what exactly it is that you're trying to convey here. So we had a problem with women who were not empowered, but now we have a problem with women who are actually empowered because they prefer to dress modestly, and now we want them to be, trending, to fit into what we consider women are supposed to be, and that is it once again back to zero, sexual objects. Again, now sexualizing every single thing, it means that we are now pushing the whole society to move out of platonic and pure and innocent relationships, and sort of throwing them into sexual relationships, so that everywhere they go and everything they see would only appear in one way to them or in one color to them, instead of a variety of colors that they could healthily choose from. So we're not promoting mental health here. We're just degrading the human mind even further by boxing it into an even smaller, tighter box that will eventually be locked. So we're not helping anybody achieve freedom in anything or of any kind. We are just locking people up once again into what we think should be the norm. And that is not freedom. It's not freedom in relationships, it's not freedom in thought processes, it's not freedom physically speaking. Again, because we are now telling people how to act, and we're telling people what a certain act means. And so if another person is not aware, because that person is not listening to your brand, for example, of message, and so that person is not aware of what that act is, and then the other person thinks that, oh, he should be aware of that act is, and then things can go wrong very fast, very bad. So we need to teach people, what we need to educate people on is that there is a variety. There are various signals that mean various things to various people in various situations and various conditions. And similarly, there are various relationships that mean various things to various people in various conditions. and that we have everybody has his own self-worth, the way he grades himself, and that everybody knows between right and wrong, and that everybody is making his or her own decision best as they can in life, and that is what we need to respect, the independence of thought, which we claim that we're working on, but actually no, we're doing the exact opposite of that. So that is what we need to look into, you know, in order to have a generation that will not be driven insane before they reach their 30s, a generation that will be vulnerable to all kinds of exposure and attacks that they shouldn't really, a generation that does not know how to protect itself from these uh, violent acts. Um, we have exposed the generation to too much, too soon, too far. We have stripped them of their sense of privacy and their independence in thought process. We have stripped them of their sense of self worth as they expose anything and everything of themselves out there in the internet, and then they get hurt as a result. We have stripped them of their innocence. We have stripped them of the learning process, of the journey, that journey of learning new things in life. We have stripped them of all of it. There's nothing new under the sun, but then now there's nothing new at all for them because they've already been exposed to the sun right from the start. So there is nothing new in life. And that's when it gets messy and gets gory, and then psychologically you always take a hit. Always. Don't try to think that oh these things are trivial or no. Psychologically you always take a hit. And when you take a hit psychologically, then that scar is almost always forever. We need to teach our children the importance of privacy, of self worth, of independence of thought. We need to teach them all about research, as in learning more and more and more about all the different things and all the various colors in life, the cultures, the thoughts. The We should expose them, just like how our generation or the generation before us, or our parents' generation, I think they were more exposed to different cultures and their writers and their works than than the current generation, really. I think that appreciation for variety is key, but never force that person to change who he or she is to fit what you think is the norm. It goes both ways. It goes both ways. Just like how you did not want to, uh, you like how you had a problem with society that did not understand your how different you are. So now society will have a problem with those who are not different. So it's counterproductive and counterintuitive. It should go both ways. Each and every difference and each and every acceptance of that difference and tolerance, that is what we should be working towards. We're not supposed to be forcing women what to wear because that suits what we think is how an empowered woman should look. We are not here to force gays to become straight. We're not here to force straight people to become gay. We're not here to force people to sexualize every single act uh, or gesture. That we're not here to force people to sexualize every single relationship. We need to give a healthy perspective to ourselves and to everybody else. Well, this is me signing out because I think I've tried to convey the message as better as I could. May have left a few things out while trying to explain certain other things. And yeah, but I do hope everybody would realize that although we think it's trivial, it's not. Every single time we force somebody to think our way, even for something as small as the way we do things in our daily lives, uh, if we just realize the effect it can have, the compounded effect, I think we would stop doing that and we would realize the impact. And then we would also realize that really it's true, there is no freedom in thought process. We're not allowing any freedom in thought process. Well, this is me signing out. Khuda Hafiz.